Hi, I'm David Jones from the Manor from Devon Cooking School. This afternoon we're going to use the Morso Forno oven to make a nice little flatbread, top it with some apple, little cinnamon icing, yoghurt and honey dip. Fantastic to eat with some fruit as a little dessert or just as a nice afternoon snack. First thing to do is make up our dough. Bread flour, 250 grams of that. And in we go with some salt and yeast, olive oil, just a little glug of that, and water. Nice and simple. I'm going to use my dough scraper to mix that up, get everything nice and well mixed, all the flour nice and wet. Using my dough scraper to chop through, gets it mixed up really quickly. And out onto the board to knead it. This should be a simple dough to knead, it's not sticky or tacky or anything like that. So I just fold and roll. So it shouldn't really take more than 6 or 7 minutes of folding and rolling to turn that into a nice, smooth, springy dough. So there we are, a nice, smooth, springy, elastic dough. I'm going to pop that straight back in the bowl, cover it with a little cling film, and put that away. Lovely and warm today, so that's going to take no time at all to start rising, but I want to leave it for an hour or so, just allow it to develop some flavour. Next little job, make a little apple sauce. So I've got Morso pan here, and into that I'm putting this chopped apple, 3 apples chopped up, Bramleys in this case, so they're going to be a little bit tart, and we're going to add some sugar. I'll go with about 2/3 of that and keep a little bit, and we'll taste it at the end. I can always stir in a little bit more. And then some apple juice in with that. And we want this to cook, soften the apples, and make a nice fluffy sort of apple sauce. Put the top on there and into a nice hot oven. That'll come up to a simmer in no time at all. I just need to make sure it doesn't start to darken or singe around the edges. So I'll put it out after a couple of minutes, give it a little bit of a stir, and then back in, and it'll start to soften, and we'll fluff it up with a fork. Okay, our apple should be nice and cooked. Let's take a look. Sizzling away beautifully and really nice and soft. So I'm going to put those straight into a cold plate to cool off before we fluff them up. And I'll just have a little taste just to make sure they're sweet enough. If not, we can add a dash more sugar. They'll be perfect, we don't need any more. Just look at our dough. It's really puffed up quickly. It's super light and super well risen. We're going to turn this straight out and then just knock it out into shape, into a disc. Little flour on the board and just ease that out. It'll make it really easy to shape if we don't disturb it too much. So there we are, flick that over, and I'm just going to use my fingertips in this case to dibble out the dough. And if I dibble it out, it'll have a lovely bubbly texture. I could use the rolling pin, but I really don't need to because it's so soft coming straight out of the bowl. And I need that to be about 30 centimetres, a foot across, something like that. And I'm just going to let that relax before I cook it, which means we can just look at the oven here and see what's going on. I've got a nice bed of embers at the back, and I'm just having a quick burn at the front just to reheat the floor. I'm going to push those right to the back and let them keep burning. We're going to use the Morso Vetro plate. We could do it straight on the floor of the oven, but we'd have to be careful to clean all the ash off. It's going to give us a lovely clean surface to cook the bread on. Give that a minute, give it a little spin round, and then I can put the bread straight on top of it. So I'm going to use this handy little gizmo. We like a gadget, and this is a digital infrared thermometer. Ever so simple, I just pointed at the Vetro plate. So that's around 239 there. Nice and hot, the sort of temperature that you'd think about cooking a bread at in the oven if you were cooking a nice flat bread at home. So I think that's about ready. I'm going to carefully bring that out, put that on there, Make sure it's nice and clean before the dough goes on. One final little stretch of this dough and straight onto the plate. That's already cooking with the heat of the Vetro plate. I don't want an excess of moisture in here. So where I've got a little bit coming out of the apple there, I'll just take that off. We'll use that to make the icing in a minute. And then I'm going to quickly mash that to make a nice apple puree. It'll just make it nice and light and fluffy. And that can go straight onto the top of the dough. Spread that out with the back of the spoon. Nice even layer. So we're going to go back into the oven now. The fire has died down. We don't really want a lot of flame coming over the top at this point. We want this to cook reasonably gently. We've got a nice bed of embers in there, which is going to give us plenty of heat. In it goes, and we should be able to watch that puffing up and cooking. Give it a spin after a couple of minutes. 6 or 7 minutes should be enough. Which gives us time for a couple of other jobs that we need to do. We're going to make a little cinnamon icing to go over the top. Apple and cinnamon. So I've got icing sugar in here and cinnamon. Let's have about a teaspoon. And then in here I've just got the juices which came out of the apples. I could just use water for this, but since I've got these juices, I may as well use them. And I really won't want very much to make a nice thick icing, just a sort of pouring consistency that can go over the top of the finished dish. And there it is, nice and thick and runny. So that's ready, and the only other thing I need is a little yogurt and some honey. A couple of tablespoons of honey into the yogurt and stir that through. That'll make a delicious accompaniment. Let's have a look at this bread again. So feeling nice and firm around the edges. If I just sort of tap underneath, it's firming up, looking reasonably cooked. I don't think it's going to hurt to have a couple more minutes. Never be afraid to assess what's going on with your cooking, especially with wood-fired oven cooking. We're never exact about times and temperatures when we're cooking with a wood-fired oven of any sort. And in this case, we think it's just going to need a couple more minutes. Put it back in for a couple more minutes. We can see it's nicely puffed and crisp around the outside, a little bit dark in one or two places where it got maybe a tiny bit too close to the embers, but that's not going to affect the whole of the bread. And if I just tap that underneath, I can feel that it's nice and firm and well cooked. So we'll let that cool a little bit, and then we can ice that, chop it up and serve it with some of the yogurt. So we're ready to slice up our bread and tuck in. Take a few nice slices out of there. And some of our yogurt honey dip to go with it. So there we have apple flatbread, cinnamon icing, yogurt honey dip, lovely with some fruit, beautiful with a bit of ice cream. The kids would love that as an afternoon treat. And all coming out of our Morso Forno oven. Fantastic.